Good morning. Did we talk about the Blue Jays yet? Okay. Anyways, I'm happy that they won. Hopefully everybody else is, so we look forward to them going to the next round. Really happy to be here this morning to talk about what I'm considering a really important amendment to the Fiscal Management Act, First Nation Fiscal Management Act, is to expand eligibility on who can access financing from us. And this came up as a result of the announcement of the Federal Loan Guarantee Program, Indigenous Loan Guarantee Program. So we've been hosting a number of webinars in different regions across the country in the last couple of weeks, just to garner, really interest, and also to look at what's involved in this amendment. So I'm really happy to have our chair, Chief Derek Epp, with us today. His community, amongst a number of other communities in British Columbia, accessed the first Indigenous loan guarantee through CDEV, and so he has some insight that he can bring to this discussion today. What we're going to talk about is we're going to go over the SPV. What is it? The potential benefits from an SPV, and the proposed amendments. What's involved in amending this legislation? It doesn't happen overnight, let me tell you. It happens, it's a long process. And how to access the loans with the FNFA to an SPV. And we're going to go over a bit about what the Indigenous Loan Guarantee is, and Chief Epp is going to explain that because he does have firsthand knowledge of that. And then we have a call to action. And then we'll close with any comments. We have a short video at the end, if we can get to that. I guess the real question of the day is, what is a special purpose vehicle? You know, we come up with these different names, these different acronyms for different things that we're working on, monetization, SPV, all kinds of things. In this case, a special purpose vehicle, as you heard Chief from Scugog just mentioning it in her opening comments today, is a really important vehicle for our nations when they're looking at investing or taking equity interest into different types of corporations or opportunities to pool themselves to work together, get First Nations working together, or to limit liability to the operations of the First Nation. So in our case, a special purpose vehicle, it's a corporation or a limited partnership that's established for the sole purpose of investing in or owning a project or specific asset. Under this initiative, the SPV could be comprised of one or many Indigenous groups that come together around an opportunity, and that the SPV would be owned by the Indigenous group 100%. That's the way we're going with this amendment. Eligible groups could be bands under the Indian Act, a First Nation that is scheduled to the First Nations Fiscal Management Act, or an Indigenous group that is party to a treaty, land claim agreement, self-government agreement with Canada. One of the conditions for the Indigenous-owned SPV to obtain financing from the FNFA is that the loan has to be backed, supported by a loan guarantee provided by Canada or a province or a Crown Corporation. I'll talk about these a bit later. The potential benefits of borrowing via an SPV, well, there's many, and I'm just going to highlight a few today, and I'll ask Chief Epp to also talk on some of the benefits that they encountered as a result of securing a loan guarantee with the federal government. So there are many benefits to an Indigenous group using an SPV to invest in a project. An SPV allows multiple Indigenous groups to work together and co-invest in large projects. As you know, most First Nations and Indigenous groups in Canada don't have the capital to participate in equity ownership stakes, so an SPV allows smaller First Nations to invest in these projects safely without risk. Also, eligible groups will not be limited to bands under the Indian Act who have worked with the FMB, who have developed an FAL approved by FMB and have obtained a certificate by FMB. So it opens the doors to groups who may not otherwise have the capacity and resources to access FNFA loans at affordable rates that we offer. So I'm going to ask Chief Epp to go over a few of the benefits that they've actually realized from this. So Chief Epp?
Yeah, thanks Ernie. Like four? Steve.
You want to come up here?
I do have a loud enough voice.
Okay.
All good. Okay, great. Yeah, thanks, Ernie. Appreciate it. Yeah, obviously, I think, shout out to Kelly LaRocca. Is that you in the table? Yes, I think Kelly actually summarized the SPVs extremely well. Thanks for sharing this morning as well, Kelly. Yeah, obviously, it de-risks the nations. And if anybody has economic development corporations, you have an SPV. And that's, your tool that you're using to actually participate in these transactions. And Ernie kind of mentioned it earlier on in the transaction I was fortunate enough to be a part of. And one of the transaction committee members. So the investment opportunity we were in was 46 identified communities had impacts from the Enbridge LNG pipeline project. If we didn't have the ability to actually structure this through an SPV, through GPs, limited partnerships, I mean, if you've ever been involved in a large-scale transaction like that, there's multiple layers of the corporate veils to middle LPs, lower LPs, upper LPs, you name it. But so it shields that liability down to the nations. If we weren't able to actually structure it in these ways, we had 38 of 46 participate in our transaction, which was fantastic in my opinion. I would hazard a guess we'd maybe have 10 to 15% of the communities actually be able to participate in this large of a transaction. We're talking about a $736 million transaction with Enbridge. After post-expansion, it's about $1.3 billion. So it's not a small transaction that, if you're looking at the demographics on the West Coast as well, especially in our territory, I kind of mentioned yesterday is, we didn't have treaties that were settled, so we have much smaller communities. So some of the communities that participated in this transaction have maybe 60 acres of land, 60, 70 members in their community, don't have the assets to be able to actually borrow against to participate in such a large transaction. So having the ability to set up these SPVs, I think, is critical. And being a lender from the FNFA, I'll share a bit more when we get to loan guarantee, but having the ability for us to lend to these entities is going to be transformational because of the capital rates that we can actually provide to our members as well. And I'll share again when we get to loan guarantee on how that actually rolls out down to communities and the benefits that it has in communities long term. So I'll leave it there, and thanks, Ernie, for allowing me to share a bit on that and give a bit of an example of how they actually structurally work when we start to talk about large scale transactions.
I'll give you back your
Oh, it's working now.
Hey. Okay, good. Thank you, Chief Epp. So the proposed amendments to enable Indigenous-owned SPVs to obtain loans from the FNFA, amendments will need to be made to the First Nation Fiscal Management Act so that FNFA's mandate would be expanded to include making loans to special purpose vehicles, SPVs. It's under Section 74B1. If those of you that have read the Act and know the Act, that's the section. If you want to go and look under there. And a new definition would be added to the Act, providing that a qualified SPV means a body, corporate, or limited partnership that is wholly owned directly or indirectly by one or more bands within the meaning of the Indian Act, First Nations within the meaning of the Act, or Indigenous group that is a party to a treaty, land claim agreement, or self-government agreement with Canada. So as I mentioned earlier, SPVs would not be limited to those owned by First Nations scheduled to the FMA, but to First Nations who are not scheduled to the Act, and First Nations or other Indigenous groups who are self-governing parties to a modern treaty or to a land claim agreement could also be eligible. The meaning of the term borrowing member under the FMA would be expanded to include qualified SPVs that have been accepted as a borrowing member of the FNFA. This would mean that SPVs would have several of the same rights and obligations as other borrowing members. Access to the FNFA loans with an SPV. In terms of how an SPV could access a loan from the FNFA, FNFA alone would assess whether an SPV is admitted as a borrowing member, just like we normally do with the borrowing members under the Indian Act that we work with right now. FNFA would conduct our due diligence, because we do due diligence on all of our projects, and the process that we currently do to evaluate if a loan can be made to an SPV having applied to become a borrowing member. This involves the review of the project, the financial and the legal analysis. Also, FNFA currently requires that revenues and access of those required to support a loan be intercepted and paid into a secured revenues trust account. I'm giving you a lot of terms here, but if you have any questions at the end, just feel free to reach out to us. This is what those First Nations that are working with understand this terminology I'm talking about. So we call it a SICR. We got the acronyms for everything. And so the same would apply to an SPV. In other words, the FNFA is paid before the remaining portion of the revenues provided by the revenue stream are paid to the Indigenous group. So that's an intercept mechanism account that we operate. As I mentioned earlier, SPVs would have several of the same rights and obligations of other borrowing members, so they would need to contribute to our debt reserve fund that is used to manage the risks of the borrowing pool. So the following would not apply. In the case of First Nations borrowing from the FNFA, what happens right now, the FMB must approve an FAL that a First Nation has issued, and FMB issues a financial performance certificate to those First Nations that are looking to access financing from the First Nations Finance Authority, and to meet certain standards applicable to financial administration. So this minimizes the risk to the FNFA's borrowing pool and acts as a safeguard to our investors. But loan guarantees would reduce the risk for the investor and eliminates the need for the FMB certificate. So this is an effort to try to get as many First Nations involved in getting affordable financing that would help them address some of their other issues in their community. So the SPS, why do we want this change? I guess that's another big question that we should, be looking at. Well, one of the main reasons why we want this change is because we provide affordable financing rates to our borrowing members right now. We don't work through the commercial banks. We actually borrow directly from the investors in the capital markets. And with our AA credit rating, we're able to access financing on behalf of our members at very affordable rates, very competitive rates to a lot of issuers in Canada right now. And also, we want to make more options available to First Nations as they're looking to get financing when they're looking for a loan guarantee from either the federal government or the provincial government. So this would give them an option to be considered for low-cost financing. And so that's one of the main reasons. And the other is that for those nations that just don't have the capacity to get through the process right now under the FMA, this would allow some of those First Nations to get involved in this and eventually use the services of the FMA, which is really important to a lot of communities. Financial management is really a key to reducing risk and really improving how a community operates financially. Yeah, and it could end up in a good rate of return to those communities, so they start to manage wealth. And so, a lot of the First Nations that we work with manage revenues. When you're managing revenues, your own source revenues, and you're developing these opportunities for yourself, you're really managing wealth. And I think that's what's really important for our communities to really be in a position to do. I'm going to now turn it over to Chief Epp to talk about the Indigenous Loan Guarantee Program. Since he does have firsthand knowledge of it, I'll keep saying that over and over because they were part of the group that actually were able to get a loan guarantee. So Chief Epp?
Yeah, thanks, Ernie. Oh, that's loud. Whew. Good morning, everybody. Wake you up a bit. Yeah, I'll go over some of the speaking notes here first, and then I'll give a bit of an example as to how it rolled out. Of course, as most of you probably are aware, it was first announced in 2024 for a $5 billion program, later doubled by Prime Minister Carney to $10 billion. Of course, it backs the Indigenous equity ownership in natural resources, energy projects, infrastructure, transportation, and trade, and that's existing and new. And that's the difference between in BC our proposed, or we haven't really seen the loan guarantee program yet, but it's talking about new projects only, which I'll talk to a bit as well. The loan guarantees, of course, as we kind of talked about, it reduces the project risk, it enables increased Indigenous participation, but there are costs to this program as well, which I'll dive into a bit as well. The loan guarantee offered by the federal government will, of course, it will help Indigenous groups access more affordable borrowing rates, promote increased Indigenous ownership of wealth generating assets, and deliver higher cash flows from their equity investments. And of course, a lot of provinces are enacting their own loan guarantee program. So I can say how it rolled out. It took us about 2 years to work with CDEV on this project. It was a long haul because it wasn't really announced yet, so we had to get in early to really almost formulate this new path with CDEV on this. So the transaction committee appointed a couple individuals to go and work on our behalf, and it was 2 years of a lot of work. And we knew from the outset that we actually needed this loan guarantee to make this transaction possible. And we knew at the moment that the only option was working with the federal government, because the provincial government in BC, one, was signaling that they would only do new projects, and two, it wasn't really ready yet. So knowing that, we decided to pursue CDEV for a $400 million loan guarantee, which gave us the right debt to equity ratio to actually be able to refinance the expansion in 3+ years. And hopefully, we can refinance with the FNFA in 3+ years, because we'll be ready to do that. And the reason why, I think it's so important that this, in my opinion, very simple amendment happens is because the cost to this program and the cost to our transaction for our advisors, for the fees with CDEV, with all the capacity that we needed to actually structure this deal, was well above $5 million to actually see this project through. It took 2 years of transaction costs, 2 years of a lot of our time to actually be involved in this. And as I said, it was, at the end of the day, I think, it was a good deal, for sure. Don't get me wrong. I think we negotiated a very strong deal. But the reality is, when we're talking about, $736 million, or eventually a $1.3 billion asset and loan, every basis point makes a massive difference in the revenue streams back to our communities. And with the FNFA's capacity and ability to lend at very competitive rates, if we could even shave off 25 basis points on the interest rates on the senior debt, that would make a massive difference back to communities annually. We're talking about, could be hundreds of thousands of dollars back to community that is being missed through not being able to access the competitive interest rates that we have at the FNFA. I could say, I would really make an educated guess that if the SPV if we were able to lend to an SPV, we would have likely structured this deal through the FNFA, simply because of the cost to services and the interest rate that we would have received through the FNFA compared to conventional debt through TD Securities or CIBC or whatever we had to go to raise the bond. It was, we were able to get a good rate, but I think we would have been able to do better at the FNFA. So that's a real life example. And of course, now you look at new projects that the province of BC is only going to fund new projects. That's also a barrier to First Nations involvement, because new projects don't come with instant revenue streams either. And we actually are able to structure our debt with the FNFA in a very different way that meets the membership's needs and be able to structure debt where you're paying interest first. And instead of having to pay interest and principal, so it really helps get involved in these new projects because they don't make money for a couple of years, let's be real. They take a long time to actually implement, so it's risky as well in that light. So there's so many advantages to coupling the FNFA's ability to lend to SPVs with an Indigenous loan guarantee that I think will benefit so many of our communities. So this one for me is such a no-brainer that I hope we see this announced in this upcoming budget as a line item that is actually going to be enacted. So thanks, Ernie. Thanks for the FNFA team for doing so much work on this. And thank you all for supporting this as well. I know so many of the communities in here have actually provided their support, and that means so much, and that actually helps us go to Ottawa and really advocate for these, in our opinion, simple amendments.
Thank you, Chief Epp. It's really beneficial to have the firsthand experience of nations that have gone through the process of securing the federal government's loan guarantee. Just for some more awareness, when you're going to access the federal government loan guarantee, you need to have your financing in place. So those groups that are working right now, there might be some of you in the room here today working to get a guarantee from the federal government for various projects that you're looking on. That's one of the things that you're probably going through right now. And these deals are massive, they're complex, and as Chief mentioned, and it takes a lot of due diligence to go through that process, and that due diligence is very costly. And so that's one of the things that we do bring to the table, because we do have credit ratings already. We don't have to go out and do a separate credit rating like they had to with their senior debt, and that's costly. We know how much a credit rating costs. It's not cheap, and so we have three. So we actually we get our credit reviewed every year by these credit rating agencies, and we've actually been fortunate to get an ascending credit rating. So our credit rating started at a single A, we're at double A now, and it's a stable outlook, which is really good in terms of an issuer of debt like the First Nations Finance Authority.
That's a really good point. Well, that's a really good point. We pay for that now.
Yes. Yeah. So that would obviously save some costs there. And so there's a lot of hoops to go through with the federal government loan guarantee, or any government loan guarantee, whether it's provincial or federal. And so that's where we could come in, because it's interesting. Some of the discussions we've had with federal officials are around. They're starting to consider new projects now, and some of the issues that they're coming up with is cost overruns. Because a lot of these projects do have cost overruns. We had a First Nation in Ontario here that was partnering with a partner on a major project, and there was cost overruns. If they didn't come up with their share of those cost overruns, they could have lost their opportunity. But luckily, they were able to find us, and we supported them with those cost overruns. So that's something the federal government is going to have to address, is cost overruns and the cost of financing during construction, because those could be enormous. And so because the federal government loan guarantee is not going to cover cost overruns, so something has to be developed there. So we're in discussions with CERNA right now. We've been talking to a lot of federal government departments. They all support this. We're working through the process. It's like anything with government, we just wish it worked faster. So it's a time thing that we're up against right now, but we'll get this through. We hope that'll be in this year's budget, not next year's budget. Some of the issues that we're dealing with CERNA on is whether the guarantee can be a partial guarantee or has to be 100% guarantee. And I don't think that the federal government's loan guarantee is going to do 100% loan guarantee. I think they'll do up to 75%. I'm just guessing here. but that's sort of my observation of our discussions. So, 100% and partial loan guarantees, we do want to do partial loan guarantees, especially if there's an existing revenue that goes with that. And one of the other ones is scheduling. So, all the First Nations here that have gone through the Fiscal Management Act, you need to request scheduling through the government. Scheduling an SPV, I don't know the benefit behind that, but we'll work that out. So not too concerned about those issues. So we do have a call to action, because with the legislation, the enabling legislation of UNDRIP, you have to go and engage, you have to do an engagement process. It's really the federal government's responsibility, but we try to help as much as we can. So this is part of our engagement that we've been having for the last couple of months now, starting with our AGM in Winnipeg and our webinars that we've been having. And this discussion that we're having here today is for those First Nations that are interested in this and would like to have this option to consider FNFA in the financing choices that they have available to support loan guarantees, we would really ask for your support. We do have letters of support, a template available. It's on our website, but it's also, you can stop at our booth here and get that. And if we can send those in, and it just would show a lot of support that we're looking at. I think, again, it doesn't hurt having these different financing options available to you when you're considering looking at a federal government loan guarantee.